We received an email from someone that you all know, Mary Brubaker, saying that there's somebody that she knows you have to meet. And that person is with us right now. Clark Eide is joining us, originally from the Des Moines area.
Des Moines, Iowa, born in Mercy Hospital.
But
the old one.
All right, the older place, the old place. Okay, where'd you go to school?
Went to school at Sacred Heart for a few years, and then at St. Augustine's, and then we moved to Molly's favorite town, Fort Dodge.
Oh yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
And now currently you reside?
I'm living in Uruguay.
In Uruguay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a little off the road and
right.
off the beaten path.
Well, I had an offer to come to Des Moines in January, and I don't know who can pass that up.
Now, tell everybody what you do. This is pretty cool.
Well, I'm a writer, and I've just released a book late last year, and so that's kind of my full-time job right now. My book's really a parable about modern life and about actually a French monk, a modern-day French monk who's fictitious, but kind of represents what I call the everyman, all of us. And the things he goes through are many of the things that we go through in our search for a connection to the divine.
A monk is a bit of a mystery to me. If someone says to you, what is a monk? How do you explain it?
A monk is a person who has taken a vow to live in a community, because all monks are, well, these days there used to be hermits, of course, and that's how it started. But nowadays they live in communities or congregations, they're sometimes called. There are different kinds. Mine's a Benedictine, and that would be the one that would probably be the most well-known. And they operate under a system of administration that was invented by St. Benedict in the 500s, and it hasn't changed. It's 1,500 years. It's called the Rule of Benedict. It's really fabulous. I would encourage anybody who has a little time to spend a day or two there at a monastery, and there's a lot of them around, that will have guests, places for them to stay and participate. But you just feel a certain peace about it, and you see how this system has worked, unlike a lot of other systems we've seen of administration of human beings. This one has stayed pretty much the same for 1,500 years, and it's some of the happiest people I know.
What was your exposure to this environment? Obviously, you've been to these places.
Yeah, my wife's from France, and we have lived in France for about 12 years too. We kind of split back and forth. But in the area we're in, which is Brittany, the northwest section of France, there was a lot of monastic activity. And I started going just out of curiosity. And having been raised as a Catholic, I'd never had any experience with monasteries or abbeys. And after going there, I just thought, well, this is a pretty cool place. And the guys are happy, and they make their own food, and gee.
So what do they do that makes them happy? Give us like one or two examples of what it's like.
The Rule of Benedict stipulates that you have what's called divine offices. And those are certain times of the day when you do certain things. And most of that revolves around community gatherings, singing the Psalms, maybe having some sacred readings. They're not always very long, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes a half an hour. Those are special times during the day. And then they have, the Benedictines have as their, I guess I'd call it their way of life, to pray and to work, ora e labora. And so what they do, they divide the day up into prayer time, and then they have times when they all have duties. And some of them are just raising animals. Sometimes it's doing good works around the communities. There's a lot of different, there's a lot of leeway actually. Monasteries can make a lot of their own decisions about rules of silence, about whether they interact a lot with the community or not, what time they have their offices. But they're all kind of throughout the day, and usually in the afternoons when they do most of their labora, their labor. And they grow things. They, every monastery you go to will have a little place you can buy jelly, and sometimes well, you know, the greatest drinks in the world were invented by monks.
Right.
You know,
beer, right?
Whiskey.
Yeah.
You go
Are they all men? Or
no,
women
not by any
really?
means. No.
See, I thought they were all men.
Well,
Good question.
Well, they usually don't call them monks. They call them nuns usually, or monial in French, and moine for the male. But there is a female monastery not very far from the male one that I like to go to in France. And in Yankton, where I have my house here in the USA, there's a monastery of 100 nuns, believe it or not.
I had no idea.
Nobody does.
No.
I think I lived in Yankton for 5 years and didn't know about it. 100 nuns, you know. So it's a wonderful community. They do all kinds of good works that nobody knows about, quite frankly.
Does it boil down to just living a simple life and involved in prayer and meditation, and is that? Yeah,
I'd say, Jason, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. But you know, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, as I point out in my book. And so you have to have other interaction. And Benedict was a genius at social, you know, interaction and social setup and administration of how people function. So he designed it so you would have the prayer time as a congregation, not so much the individual time stipulated you have to do this. It's more like come together, we do this, we sing some psalms, we have some ceremonies. And then the other time we work, we can talk, during the day. It's not prohibited. We eat together, and usually in silence with the monk that's reading some text or something, and sometimes they're hilarious texts. The guys are just laughing, they're trying to eat. But it's just a nice balance. I think balance is the word I would use to describe monastic life. And I wish that people could see it more, because I think a lot of people would be attracted to it. It's a peaceful place. You can all practically walk onto an abbey ground or a monastery and sense the peace that people have there.
Now, are monks celibate?
Yes, they are. This reminds me of one of my favorite jokes. I'll tell you.
So how do they keep the monks going if the monks can't reproduce?
Oh well, we have to get guys like Jason, change careers.
So they
Oh, don't tempt me.
So they rely on a system where everyone converts. It might make sense for them to reproduce.
Well, I imagine that some have done that, perhaps unauthorized, but. No, it's a decision. Nobody wants to force anybody to do anything. So I think, you come out of school and you're looking for something to do, and maybe you have a religious calling of some kind. You don't want to be a parish priest. You don't want to, you want to develop your contemplative side. And there are a lot of contemplative people, which I find out from the book.
I was going to say, is that where the book takes us?
Yes, the book starts with his work-a-day life, just exactly what you're asking about. I start in the book talking about monasteries, because there's not much good writing about a monk if you don't know how they function. So we get through that and a little bit of his personal history, and then we go into some of the temptations and problems he runs into, because he's Joe Blow like the rest of us, really. Mm-hmm. He just happens to be in a different kind of community. And how he then finds his way back to peace, finds his way back to a divine connection. And the essence of this book is to distill a lot of the experiences I've had in looking for ways to connect to that other part of us that we don't always connect to very well. And it's not difficult. It just has to be something you want to do. And a lot of people were like me, successful guys who, hit a certain age and you think, well, I personally have always been a contemplative, but I think, there's got to be more than what I'm seeing here. My traditional religion isn't really answering those questions. It's telling me a lot of things to do, but it doesn't really tell me what to experience, how to open myself up to a God experience or a divine experience. So I did an awful lot of 20-odd years ago. I started my search very seriously, going to look at other religions, pagan religions, just about anything you can name. But they all boil down to one thing, and that's a personal divine connection, whatever you say. That's what, no matter what layers we put on top of that in terms of religion or clergy or anything else, that's what it comes down to. And I thought, guys like me all over the place, they don't want to play golf every day, they don't want to waste their time, but they're not getting the answers. So there must be some other place to go, and there are other places to go. We don't have everything in the world that there's a lot of other things to find in the world.
And you are going to make a connection tomorrow, is that right?
That's right. I'm at Beaverdale Books at 2 o'clock tomorrow in the Beaver Shopping Center there. Come on out. We'll have some readings. We'll do a little talking and sell some books. Looking forward to that.
If you read this, is there a bit of how-to to this story?
There is. It's funny because in Uruguay I had a guy who actually moved down from the States, and he's 80 years old, and he wanted to read it, so he did, and he says, you know what? About 3 weeks after I was done, it occurred to me, this is a self-help book. And I thought, well, that's not exactly how we put it, but for him it worked. It gave him some ideas.
That is great. Clark, thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.